little bit more objective, I guess you could say. But then again, versus every monster, depending on which weapon you use, some may be, more difficult than others. So some people might think some are, more poorly designed because of that.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely going to try to keep that in mind. Although I do remember when I rewatched when I personally rewatched that video, I just liked how often I was saying and that kind of those words. God, I hate those filler words, but I said them so often it bugged the shit out of me.
All right,
I'm going to try to avoid being like that.
All right, so I'm live right now.
Okay.
For a lot of people who are watching, disregard. I have a little allergy thing going in, so I might mute myself on stream just to get a couple blows off.
Mm-hmm.
What you are about to hear is not for the faint of heart.
Beware. Beware that what you call it, what you're about to listen to is based solely on the opinions of the people who are currently discussing. So obviously people will generally have different opinions, but we will try to look at this as objectively as possible. And so for this tier list, we are going for overall design, which includes gameplay, the gameplay design, like how it feels to fight against them, the design of the monster, like how cool or how terrible it looks, and as well as the lore perspective. So kind of like the overall kind of thing with each monster.
So I got my cheat sheet out just in case. I may not know some of these monsters, but reading it to them just in case. So who do we start? Should we start with from top to bottom, bottom to top?
Oh, like in the order here?
Yeah.
I thought we were going to start with some of the lower tier monsters and work our way up, but we could definitely do top to bottom.
Yeah, because the way it's organized is kind of it throws me off.
It is pretty kind of all over the place here. So
yeah.
All right. So left to right, then.
So Adjanath, right? Oh fuck.
All right, let's start with Adjanath. Good old pink T-Rex.
My little fluffy boy.
For Adjanath, I think he is a solid monster, fire, he roams around, he's moderately aggressive, kind of, he acts like a dinosaur, more or less, or what you would think a dinosaur would act in the jungle.
Yeah. My thoughts on it, initial thoughts, his design isn't, completely original. After all, everyone calls him a pink T-Rex, and that's essentially what he looks like, with the exceptions of the nose bone and the wing fans on his back and whatnot, and the fact that he has some fur, which may or not have been historically accurate for actual T-Rexes, but he's the first monster that really kind of ups the difficulty in monster when you first start. After the Great Jagras and Pookie Pookie, he is kind of the monster that you go is oh wow, this is actually going to be a fairly difficult fight. And he does kind of turn the dial up just a little bit in terms of difficulty. And for some, when they're first starting out, if they're brand new to the series, this is generally what a lot of people would consider their very first wall would be, starting out with the basic gear and all that. So as far as lore is concerned, I mean, there isn't really much to say, considering that he did appear, in World as his. That's where he made his first appearance. So it's I'd say his overall design, personally, for me, would be kind of in the decent area. He's not poorly designed, because he does have, a lot of fairly telegraphed hits and hitboxes and whatnot. He's, good to fight against. I mean, the only thing going for him, honestly, is, his overall look. He looks literally like a pink T-Rex. with a
Um,
few different changes. So, what are your thoughts on this, Yuri?
so, given how he is like one of the most significant brute wyverns I've ever seen, aside from the very creative ones, compared to like Glavenus or Uragon and all that. I
Mm-hmm.
threw when I first encountered this monster, I started to like really look at his fluffy pelt. It was the first thing that distracted me. But in terms of
Yeah.
challenge and difficulty, when he wants to upscale the fight, he does turn heavily aggressive with the wings coming flapping out of his back, and the nose and the fire coming out. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
he seems like the monster where if you piss him off, obviously he'll just want to get dead on you and like dead down. Like he doesn't really care how he'll swing himself towards. He'll just incinerate anything that comes in his path the second he just opened his nose opens his
Mm-hmm.
nose up, and ecology wise, I have just seen this monster act more like a dog in my eyes. Like adorable when he sleeps and all that, but he just seems to just roam and chill. Turf Wars aside, even though majority of World's Turf Wars is kind of like a copy and paste, but for Turby Kadachi, it's kind of like he tries to snatch his whole jaw into him, and Toby Kadachi
Mm-hmm.
just goes straight into like, nah, I literally have these like electric sparks, you can't eat me, compared to any other he tries to put his sinks his teeth into. But
Mm-hmm.
considering that he is everybody's first wall, considering that
Yeah.
he's everybody's first wall. There was a time where I caught his aggression, and me thinking, oh, he's pissed. I can take advantage of this, and suddenly one of his fires it was just like a surprise thing, got me in the
Mm-hmm.
instant, and I just did not see that coming. I would put him on
Mm-hmm.
a fairly decent design for a T-Rex with the wings and nose.
Yeah. So I guess we kind of agree that he is, a decent designed monster overall. So probably from squarely in the decent design. Would you agree with that placement, Liffy?
Nah, he sucks. Yeah. I would agree. I would agree with that placement, especially given that it's in a game
Oh,
like most of that.
Hmm?
It's the people are supposed to be introduced to monsters. Like as a monster that like you don't want it too basic, you don't want it too complex, and Anjanath just fits the bill.
Mm-hmm. I see. All right then. So Angelath is a pretty decent design overall, I guess. So I guess let's move on to the next one, Azure Rathlos. Okay, so this one's kind of turning it up a little bit more.
I feel Azure Rathalos is just disappointing, in my opinion. It's like he's not bad, he's just okay, but it's just the fact that he's okay which is disappointing because that like the game introduced a different type of Rathalos and Raytheon variants, right? And it's kind of like each of them have are basically a step up from the next, so they become more aggressive, they're able to do more things, they're more complex in their moves, and they can basically combo their moves and try and keep you in place. Like this is how a more developed wyvern would feel like, right? But then Azir Rathalos, it just he doesn't feel like he adds anything to the table compared to where he's supposed to be and where the other Rathalos are. It's just like if he had more to his kit, feel I would enjoy him a lot more. But all they really did for him was just have him spam a bit more, and that's just not interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do kind of agree with you to an extent. I do think that the biggest change between the regular Rathlos and Azure Rathlos is the fact that his skin is a bit harder, and I think he does tend to fly a little bit more. I think that might just be me. I'm not exactly sure based on his AI, but when it comes to fighting Azure versus Rathlos, they seem like very similar fights. It's just Azure Rathlos has harder skin, so it's a little harder to take him down. But I do kind of have to agree with you that him doesn't really add too much per se, and so I'm kind of on the fence here between putting him in the whole decent design versus poorly designed. Because I mean, the color change is different, and I mean, I'm obviously biased for the color because my favorite color is blue, so I like the color scheme better. But like you kind of mentioned, he doesn't really add too much in the terms of gameplay or much in the way of lore. Yeah, I don't think that it's really explored all that much either. Just we just got a stronger variant of Rathlos.
Yeah,
so,
and
that's
add
about
on to
it.
that. To add on to like lore wise,
Mhm.
from he is a variant of Rathlos, like one of the top of the kin, stronger versions, more intelligent and nimble, hence mobile versions of Rathlos, with a
Mhm.
hyper aggressive mode. So this is the Rathlos that
Mhm.
will like be to beat the original per se, just to go for that Rathian.
Mhm.
So, dear God, these allergies. But yeah, he in terms of his appearance in World and 3 and 4 Ultimate, in terms of those games, and even Frontier as well. He hasn't really applied too much at the table, just post aggression, kind of like if he were to be a tempered variant or so. So if I was just gonna go for like design and gameplay wise, I would fairly just put him in poorly designed because it's kind of like it's a color swap of Rathalos with a double aggression. If we were to have this, if we were to just
Mhm.
put this Rathalos as a high rank variant, and then you get a G rank regular Rathalos variant, they'll either just hit hard. Well, one of them will hit hard, but will act about the same.
And,
Yeah.
and another thing as well is they kind of basically just made a better Azure Rathalos with Silver Rathalos when Monster Rank came in. So it's just kind of like
Mhm.
Azure Rathalos should have just been Silver and then call it a day.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Honestly, I don't know if I could even find much difference between a tempered regular Rathlos and a Azure Rathlos.
Yeah.
Honestly, just they both kind of seem so similar. So I guess we all kind of agree that he would
so is
probably
that
fit in the
so
poorly
does that mean
designed
we
section.
could just like skip from red and from blue and red? Because I would put Rathalos fairly designed as a as a decent design compared to him being a poorly designed because of the simple fact that when you have Red Rathalos, he's literally the whole Mario of Monster Hunter. He's the face of it all, and you're gonna see him in every other installment. You know, his whole ecology is basically simple,
Hmm.
raging, angry,
Yeah.
wrathful wyvern. If for those who just, it's an obvious thing in his name, which is Wrath. So Rathalos.
Hmm.
So he's basically like that first wyvern you fight, and the first monster, or probably so or not. Uh, I might be wrong on that, but you
Hmm.
know, he's annoying. One of these Rathalos is annoying, and one thing that I think in World they did really post ad as a thing that Rathalos used to do, or any Rathalos used to do, is roar into a fire blast immediately without giving you the time to think or react.
Hmm.
So if I'm just gonna like put Azure as poorly designed, but Rathalos like decent design.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So we could just not like go straight into the two Wraths.
Okay, so you want to like talk about the regular Rathlos at the same time because I do agree that they are very similar. However, one is kind of the face of the whole series and is when you think Monster Hunter, one of the first monsters you think of is Rathlos because that's what you see on the cover of a lot of games, um, as well as in a lot of art. And in general, I let's see. As far as like how it feels to fight him, like in general, like any of the Rathlos, it is kind of it
He
can be a
feels
little
just
rough
he
if you
feels like a fairly decent fight, pretty much, as it's literally
yeah.
Rathlos. He is unique in his own way for Flying Wyvern. compared to all the other flying wyverns that we have. So
Yeah, like and all the such, and yeah, he is the apex predator generally of the locality that he lives in world, and that is the ancient forest. So, I mean, I definitely would give the regular Rathalos at least the decent design, possibly pretty cool design, just because I mean he is, for one, he like I said, he is kind of the face, and he's of the monsters, like not including Zero Rathalos, he is pretty got a pretty interesting design as a wyvern. Wyverns go, like I think he does look pretty cool. But fighting him, on the other hand, can suck, especially if you're a melee, as a much more melee oriented player.
Especially when he just stays in the air 90% of the time, which is his main advantage point to punish players. A lot of people call that bad design, but that's literally his gimmick. If you want to get up and close, and if he gets pissed, he'll roar into a fire blast, which is to punish players into not being prepared for the roar, because he does have a wind up to his roar, and a lot of people don't pay attention to that.
So, for the regular Rathalos, would you say that he probably does belong decent, pretty cool? I personally think he's pretty cool, just for the originality of the monster itself.
Yeah.
So I feel like he'd probably squarely be placed in pretty cool.
So let's try for silver as well.
You want to go ahead and add silver to the mix? All right.
Since he's another.
All right. So silver.
Like I said before, silver is just like he's good, and he's Azir Rathalos done properly. He actually has a few unique features that make him a lot more enjoyable in a fight. Some people might be annoyed by his metal skin, but I actually just really like the way it adds, because he kind of has like this semi super armor because of it, and then also I just like the way when he charges his blasts. His blasts are bigger, they're hotter, they're more vibrant, and they just do have a lot more effects. Also, they have the ground is still burning.
Yeah, I think they call it a hellfire, specifically because his fire is so much more powerful than normal variants. I think it's called hellfire.
Yeah, his fire is still burning the ground, and you have to watch out for it. You can't just instead of just being dodging fireballs, now you have to watch your environment. It's very cool and very interesting.
Yeah, my only gripe with this guy is that he only appears either in the Guiding Lands or in the Elder Recess area, in a very specific part of the Elder Recess area where Nergigante normally inhabits, and I'm talking just that little cave area to the top. So honestly, I wish he would appear in more places, because I mean, honestly, I do think of this Rathalos variant being he's really cool. I truly think that they actually did Silver Rathalos really well. I also enjoy the fact that he's silver. He's far more powerful. He uses different kinds of attacks, and what that's different from the usual Rathalos. It kind of sets him apart from the whole Rathalos family. So and because of that, I kind of think personally, I think he kind of should fit in the amazing design. But that's just me. I mean, I would like to hear what you guys would think first before before placing. So
in terms of combat, given that this is one of the most well done designs for Silver Wrath compared to previous games. And all, he does what Azure does, but better. You are inflicted with poison. If he does know that you're super close, he will stop and inflict poison within you. He will immediately go into a hellfire state when he is enraged, giving you a lot more options to think whether you should get close to him or not. And his armor makes it to where you have to think twice and adjusting some fencing skills or mind's eye skills. So in terms of
Mhm.
like trying to like get what you need from this monster, say his tail cut is one of the most brutal things of the fight if you really want to go for that.
Yeah,
And I feel
and
that's
I
like one of
also
the challenging parts about him is kind of like if you really are trying to farm from him, his tail is like one of the main objectives that you need to like focus on and try not to get hurt too badly doing so.
mhm. And I also
Yeah.
like to point out kind of how he also makes you, kind of have to make a decision between what you want to disable first. Do you want to disable his flying ability, or do you want to disable his fire breath? Because when he enters his powered up state, you're it's like either you want to break his head so that you can do more damage and negate his super strong fire abilities, or do you want to break his wings so that um he doesn't fly quite as often, or do you want to cut his tail so that he doesn't have quite as much? So it's like every option that you have with attacking him is you know it has its strengths, its weaknesses, whatnot, the pros, cons, and whatnot. So I do kind of like how that sort of thing works versus the other two. Like you said, I feel like he really is a better Azure Rathalos.
Yeah, it's only a shame that he is stuck to a specific area, and that like removes him from being like high tier to like top tier. It's just the fact that he's
Mhm.
limited by location. Well, I
Yeah.
feel that in Monster Hunter World, that's actually an issue with a lot of monsters. It's just that the RNG of their locations is just limited, and if they were to just move into a lot more different areas, naturally they would be a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah, he was in 3 or 4 places. One the big the arenas, and two big the guided lands and the in the Elders Reeses. But there were times where I tried to make sure that I could like break their AI to get out of the Elders Reeses, and I could never do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like yeah.
So yeah, honestly, that's probably the biggest thing that really held him back, is the fact that he didn't really go anywhere else outside of those specific areas. So you
They
couldn't
were trying
really
to give him the
utilize the
arena
environment
vibe.
much. Yeah. You can't really use your environment too much outside of the areas that you normally fight in. So um
I just put him in
as far
pretty cool
as like
design.
pretty cool design,
Yeah.
you don't want to put him in amazing design?
If he was to be an amazing design, I think in terms of how all their armors looked about pretty much about the same, just like a color palette swap. If there was anything different, say, you know, the deviants of the rafts or their zeniths of the rafts or the raised wings or say the other versions, the
Mhm.
stories types, I would
Well,
put amazing design, but I just couldn't.
of all the Wrathful sets, his is the most useful, especially in terms of elements, because you get the true critical element, a type of bonus with him, and for a lot of elemental sets when starting out, that's generally what you want to go for versus the others, at least, where uh, I don't think you get quite the same. I think in high rank you get the critical element from Rathalos, but I don't think it's the same in master rank. I think you specifically get that from Velkhana. So I think giving him true critical element was does kind of it makes it so that you do have to fight him if you want to get a really good elemental set. Um, but yeah, honestly, at the very least, I'd say he does belong in the pretty cool design area.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so um,
Gold Raffian.
all right, do we want to start on the Rathian family then, and
Nah,
start with
nah,
Gold
not
Rathian
yet.
and work our way down, or
Nah.
okay? So we want to keep going for the next monster then?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So Baroth.
Big head.
Um,
He
big
dreams to be a
hard head.
Diablos.
That honestly, I agree.
Yeah, Baron is a very good baby monster for all the new baby hunters that want to be big in the world and figure out what's going on. It's kind of like it's very adorable when you see the new hunter of the sword and shield, and like they're learning how to block, and you see them get thrown around by a Baroth, and like it's even funny because it's like, when you first start the game, you'd be like, oh, Barroth is really fast, but then like you meet other monsters in the game, and then you go back to Barroth. It's like, oh, look at his tiny feet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I mean,
I really like him.
yeah, from a new player perspective, I could. He doesn't exactly turn up like the difficulty notch all that much, but in terms of fighting monsters that move more often, because he does have charged attacks, and he does have very significant tells for a lot of his for those specific attacks. Yeah, he's got some pretty significant windup for from what I can remember for most of his attacks, and the fact that it kind of gets you used to the idea of monsters who might coat themselves in a protective layer that can be taken off with either with like mud pods, or whether he can use the mud itself and just kind of shake it off and get you kind of stuck in some mud.
Yeah.
I think that was a fairly interesting kind of design choice. And I think he's the first monster where, depending on whether he's covered in mud or not, his elemental resistances change as well. His weaknesses change. Like, I think when he's covered in mud, he is more weak to fire, was it? And then if he wasn't, he was weak to water.
No.
Or was it the reverse?
When his body, it's reverse. When he's covered in
Okay, yeah.
When he has like covered in water, mud, he's weak to water, and then he's weak to fire when his body is clean.
Okay, I gotcha. So yeah, that's even though I don't think a lot of people would pay attention to that, it does kind of create a it kind of makes things a little bit more interesting about him as far as elemental weaknesses and what go based on his current state. I'd say I'd put him in the kind of decent design personally, but once again, I'd like to hear from you guys what you would think of this monster.
Well,
yeah, I'd put him in the decent category as well.
Now, for him and being in his prior nature, this monster does like to roam and like bonk his head a lot to test himself out. So, I remember at some points where he had the turf war with Diablos. He thought he could one up a Diablos and get destroyed entirely, let alone Giratotus as well. And that was even funnier. That was a lot more funnier.
Yeah.
So to see this monster getting bitched left and right, even from a tier 1 monster with him, is kind of like, he doesn't really have much going on for him, but just being a charge up heavy brute. But in like the lesser case, he's just a puppy to Diablos.
An adorable chunky baby.
But him just wanting to recede to the mud all the time, I do find that pretty cool for a decent design monster.
Yeah, the whole, I don't know, crown horn is really hard. He's got a pretty hardened body in general. Let's see. I think he is one of the first monsters that you can actually that you meet that has a no, I take it back. It's not. He's not the first, but yeah. So what do you think about this? If
I completely agree.
So I guess it's all kind of in agreement that Barroth in general he's a decently designed monster, with interesting mechanics and whatnot that he's got going on. Not quite like terrible or anything, but not quite super amazing. But for a beginner kind of monster, I think that he's pretty decent for what the hunter kind of encounters at his point in time.
Yeah, at this point, it would be really cool if we could just have 4 hunters mount a Barroth and, just ride the Barroth into battle.
Yeah, just have his head just drag across the ground and just charge at anybody who tries to stand in those hunters' way, pretty much.
Okay, so I guess it's pretty
I mean,
pretty
he is a
unanimous.
brief depiction of a train when you piss him off. He starts blowing steam
Yeah,
off his head too.
yeah. He makes the actual steam sound that's well, not just whenever he begins to charge. It really is kind of adorable what he is like. So yeah, all right, it's pretty unanimous. He's very decently designed. So all right, next up, good old B-52.
B-52 bomber incoming.
Yes.
He's literally the monster kill
Oh
streak.
boy. Oh man, back in World, whenever you heard the whenever you heard this guy's roar, or whenever you heard the distinctive music, you were always like, "Oh no," because he always invaded your hunts, especially investigations. He was just all over the place.
See, Basil Geese was very, very enjoyable. I really just loved his interactions because when he's invading, right, and when he's coming, he's coming, but it's just like depending on the monster, the interaction with his bombs is like somewhat different, all the time. And sometimes I actually enjoy the chaos that he brings. Like sometimes some people be like, "Oh, flash him out of the sky," or put him away. But I'll just like refrain from doing that because he makes the hunt a lot more fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also, it's actually it's also really fun when you don't even know he's coming, right? And just all of a sudden, napalm across the ground and just belly flop.
Yeah, he just kind of just charges in head first, and you're just like, "Oh no, snap!"
See, he's literally what the monster of the movie needed to be because you got the military there. So with his roar,
Yeah.
the military would think, "Oh, we're saved," but no, it's just another a live version of a B-52 coming at your way.
Actually, that would have been, now speaking about it, that would have actually been the best thing for the film, right? Have them like Basil Geese drop his pods and it starts exploding and they think they're under an air raid or something, only to find out it's just Basil Geese, right? And you know what? Have them mention that have them think that they're actually getting bombed by a B-52 and then they realize it's Basil Geese. That would have actually been really good.
I think that would have been hilarious, honestly, personally.
But for him being an invader, and yeah, he has been one of the most enjoyable invaders, let alone Seething also had a pretty cool design. Actually, a more amazing design that his pods turn into like genuine popcorn and literally seethe because like seething,
Mm-hmm.
gets into the air when he is about to do his little bullshit. He'll start dropping pods, and then suddenly he's just like making the alarm noise coming down to you with a kamikaze like structure. Even Devil Joe couldn't even sink his teeth into this monster, even if he tried.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were like in their turf wars, they were always so evenly matched.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, I really do enjoy the lore behind this monster, the way he is an invader monster, and from I remember watching some videos about him and how his competitive nature, and why how it's supposed to how it fits within the ecosystem and his place in the ecosystem. And I thought it was pretty interesting how I think that he was actually made supposedly to be the counter or antithesis to like a Devil Joe, who was supposedly the world eater and would actually destroy ecosystems supposedly, and he was kind of like nature's way of putting him in check in some ways because of it. It's as I mentioned, in turf wars they are very evenly matched. Like they end up hurting themselves like pretty harshly. So, but the fight in general, like fighting him, and sometimes encountering him on hunts, it really is honestly, it could be annoying at times sometimes because you always see him coming in a lot. But he did, add a lot of the good
He
kind of chaos that you want to see in a kind of hunt.
he will sneak into your hunts 90% of the time without even
Hmm.
fair warning. It's kind of like when I first saw him and suddenly I got like spooked and hit by something else and didn't even realize because I was like, okay, you have three monsters. I was fighting a Rathian, there was a Devil Joe, and then there's him. He was literally not the icons being showed. So I would assume that it would have been like what Toby Kadachi or Ed. It
Hmm.
was legitimately just all I saw was just a siren sound as he was just creeping to me and then just start hitting me like what the fuck. Like for this is an invader monster I hope and pray to see in Wise because of the simple fact that we really need those type of aggressive monsters that bring like they're just there because they see you fighting and they want to fight. They want to assert their dominance. They want to show that they're at the top of the food
Exactly.
chain.
Hmm.
I also really like it when how I like his animation of when he's dropping his pods. He's just because when he's growing new pods, it pushes out the old pods, but like some of the pods get stuck inside each other. So like when he shakes them off, and you can see the animation of him trying to brush himself off and shake it off, it really, really feels very natural.
Hmm. So, as far as a placement, where do we think we'd probably want to place this guy? I mean, at the very bare minimum, I do think he is pretty cool. I wouldn't mind seeing him in Amazing Tier.
I would put him at amazing tier,
Along
but
with his seething state.
sadly, I would actually put his seething from amazing to top tier, and the reason being mainly because seething isn't an invader.
Oh, so do we want to like talk about Seething at the same time? His
Yeah.
variant. While we're at it, well, let's see where we replace like the original basic geese first. I mean,
amazing tier is where I would.
would you agree? Do you think you should go into the Amazing tier, or do you think you might not quite deserve that honor? I'm actually pretty torn. Because I mean, I do think that his concept is super awesome. Although, as a player, I do feel frustrated sometimes when he does invade a hunt. And obviously, based on the lore, he just sees fight as like, I want to assert my dominance to show you just who truly is, the top dog here. But it can get pretty. It could get pretty annoying sometimes when you see this guy, coming around. But in my design, in my opinion, of all the invader type monsters, he probably is, in my opinion, the coolest of them all. So I would not be, opposed to putting him in the amazing design tier. He really is, something else, pretty unique. Very strong, like almost elder dragon type strong, especially considering he can contend with the likes of a Devil Joe, which is no small feat in and of itself. So, what are your thoughts, Yui? You think we could place him in amazing design, pretty cool design, or?
All right, I'm back. Sorry about that.
Oh my gosh! Oh man, we've been talking this whole time.
But for seething and regular basic geese, I would put them in amazing design.
Oh, you actually would like to put both of them in amazing design?
Well, because their ultimates are entirely different, and seething Basil Geese's ultimate is something that you really don't want to get around with, let alone with his pods when they're about to pop like landmines and as they expand. So that in itself is just Minesweeper with the Hunter, and that's like really a really good design mechanic. And I feel like if he was added in Rise, that would even be better because we were going to be seeing a lot of his pods shot out all over the place.
Well, I would definitely agree with the Basil Grease design. I'm not so sure actually about Seething's design, just because Seething specifically becomes less of an invader, and he's actually pretty much relegated to just the Elder's Recess. And for the most part, once you fight him once, you don't exactly see him very often whenever you go back to the Elder's Recess. Like, a lot of times you just see other monsters that are generally from the Elder's Recess, but you don't really see him all that much, at least from what I've normally seen. So it's, and even when, like, my own experience from the fight, it was kind of tedious trying to fight this guy. I mean, obviously, you know, he has similar bombs, but his can be, you know, stronger in general. And
But along with his
when it
fight,
comes to
he is also a
the
sponge
stronger
compared to his
version,
original variant.
what's up?
I mean, compared to like what, even though his fight becomes tedious, he is, to compensate for that, he is a lot more spongier. This variant,
Yeah.
it really is a lot more weaker. He's prone to flinching a lot more compared to his normal side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not so sure about personally putting him in amazing design. I mean, he is pretty cool. Do not get me wrong. He is pretty awesome, especially with the purple glow that he has on his paws that make him stronger and just have, you know, more powerful in general. You know, something to really look out for, and that he has a new, like a new actual dive bomb move that, you know, you really need to watch out for. And I always thought those were cool because, I mean, besides Brachydios, he is the other kind of personification of explosions everywhere.
Yeah.
So,
for seething so for Basil Geese, I would put him at amazing, but then I would drop seething down one just because of the fact that he's homebound.
yeah, that's kind of where I kind of where I'm at with Basil Geese or seething Basil Geese. I mean, like I said, he has got, you know, the same similar design as Basil Geese, but he's not an invader. And I think a lot of people were definitely disappointed that we don't really see him often outside of the Elder's Recess anymore. So that kind of, you know, relegated, you know, the amount of time that we really see him to, you know, the time you see him in the story, and maybe the few times you might see him in the volcanic region and the guiding lands, and maybe the sparse 1 or 2 times you might see him in a hunt that happened to be in the Elder's Recess. But overall, I never really see this guy very often. It's really disappointing, honestly, because I mean, despite how tedious of a fight it could be, he is still pretty cool in general. And so that's where I would, you know, would kind of drop him from amazing to just pretty cool. It's because they don't really do much with him outside of the story. So I don't know. I truly do think he would just kind of sit in pretty cool at the very least.
Whew.
So I think for now let's keep him in the prequels. You know, if anything else comes up later, we could probably move him, but he definitely deserves to be in the pretty cool area. So I think it's enough about the Basil Geese. Let's move on to Behemoth. Honestly, I
did not play the MMO as often to even know about this monster.
Yeah, I mean, I know about the monster. You don't even have to play the MMO if you've played any of the Final Fantasy games. I mean, he's a fairly recurrent monster in some of the other games.
Behemoth. Yeah. So I mean, just to sidetrack, in the Final Fantasy games, Behemoth is definitely a lot more tedious in the MMOs. Oh well, I wouldn't even say tedious. I'll just say a lot longer and harder to fight because basically in Worlds we have like 3 or 4 phases for Behemoth. That is what is in the MMO as well. He has multiple phases, but in the MMO he has like 5 or 6 phases, and sometimes how it works is that within like one Final Fantasy game you would fight 6 different variations of Behemoth, each of them getting harder and harder as you fight as you unlock them, with like the hardest Behemoth probably taking around like 2 hours to 4 hours to fight. It can actually be that extreme.
Mm-hmm.
I know in 14 there was a behemoth fight that was like 6 hours, and it was like 15 or 16 players that were together fighting him.
Yeah, I haven't like fought him in the MMO or anything. I'm only familiar with the Final Fantasy like the console games and stuff. So I'm only familiar with those designs in particular. And I mean, in those games, he is pretty strong in general. Would I put him on the similar tier as like some of the monsters we have on this list? I mean, or at least the not or at least where they try to put him as a truly terrible threat that could potentially wipe out the a lot of the new world. I'm not so entirely sure about that. I mean, this version of Behemoth, the way they made him, he definitely seems like a pretty powerful threat with the way he can summon comets and whatnot. So, I mean, he does seem like an actual veritable threat, lore wise and whatnot. But as far as like the actual in-game fight, they truly did kind of try to go like actual MMO style with this, with there being like a dedicated tank, and you have your DPS and a probably a healer, someone with a support, to try to defeat this guy. And I personally wasn't a fan of that. It kind of went away from the true style of monster. Like, so, I mean, especially with the...
It's a new mechanic that tried to work, but almost it just couldn't sometimes.
Yeah,
he was just too wild.
I feel compared to what his original stuff is, I feel they did a good job with converting him to world. I just feel that an issue with Behemoth is really... One big issue with Behemoth is really is the map. Like the Elder's Recess, no, he should have had his own map. Like they should, in the cutscene where he came in, there should have been a scenario where he blew up a chunk of the Elder's Recess and it like changed the terrain. And that would give us a new map where we fight him, because he's basically somewhat of an arena monster. Not Siege, but more of just a classic arena monster. I mean, that's how Behemoth functions in his own games. He's an arena, you go into a dungeon and you meet him. And Monster Hunter already has arena monsters. So I think if they made him an arena monster, it would have been a lot better and a lot more functionable to fight against, and you'd have had a lot more versatility. But because you were limited to the Elder's Recess, there was just so little you could do. Like, for example, it's kind of an ambush the way you're forced in to fight him, because you go down that slope and it's like, you like, no matter how like far out you are, the moment he can see you and you can see him, he will aggro onto you. That's just how it is. So it's like, and it's such little time to actually really get a placement. It's more of an ambush than it really should have been. But overall, I do think they did a good job with converting what he used to be into what he is in world.
Yeah, his fight was pretty challenging, let alone his extreme variant, but those tornadoes were really just all over the place. At that point, the second you fuck up and you let those tornadoes like be all over the map, you're guaranteed to just get your ass handed to you every step of the way. Really,
it's easy. Yeah, it's easier to manage the tornadoes if you're alone, but then like if you're in a group, the issue is the group members also need to pay attention to where the teammates are, and like know to go somewhere else where the tornadoes won't impact on the fight. However, if the tornadoes are like all over the place, I still kind of find it fun, because the tornadoes aren't like too big, and sometimes you'll be fighting and you can go like in between them, and honestly it's actually just kind of this cool sight when he's like, see him summon the meteor and there's all these tornadoes and the lightning and stuff. It's like, yeah, this is a cataclysm thing.
And while I do think that the concept of of the behemoth is really cool, I'm not so sure if he if a dedicated map that he should should have shaped the Elders Recess in particular, just because it technically is kind of non-canon the way they introduced them, and they specifically mentioned that the crossovers in general were considered non-canon. So I'm not so sure about actually shaping the way certain biomes already work specifically for him. Although I do kind of get what you're going with there, as well as with the fight itself. The fight itself was definitely challenging. The mechanics though is truly where I had more of an issue with, and it kind of goes back to what I mentioned about them trying to make it so that you had the Trinity in typical MMO style stuff, because I'm pretty sure they were trying to base it off the Final Fantasy 14 kind of fight where in general you need a tank and you need DPS and you need a healer, and
Honestly, those aspects,
I don't think that works for World
it did
in
not work for
particular.
World. It was a very poor placement. The monster design and his attacks were really nice and astonishing. It's just the placement for what they were trying to do, and the map for it was just didn't work out. It's just not gonna work out. It was just really bad.
I think based on my ideas and opinions, I think he probably would fit. He would probably be placed in the poorly designed. I mean, he could possibly be placed in the terrible design, but I do think that his concept really is super cool. If it wasn't for the mechanics that you had to do, especially because he also he's also the first monster, I think, to implement a party wipe mechanic, with the that big super massive comet falling down, and if you didn't have all the those little mini comets placed properly and you weren't hiding behind them, then your entire party could be wiped. So it definitely was a lot more team oriented than some of the other monster fights that you'd normally have. So you really did need to have a good party, or if you did try to solo it by yourself, you really kind of had to know what you were doing, and you had to have a very good understanding of how to use your designated weapon of choice. So honestly, I just don't think he quite fit in Monster Hunter as in general for a crossover monster, despite the cool design. That's why in general I'd put him in the poorly designed area. Just the concept great, execution not quite so great. What do you guys think?
Nah, I just put him in poorly designed.
I would put him in okay, but yeah, poorly designed.
He wasn't exactly the most well received fight. I mean, everyone did think he was cool for sure, but when it came down to it, especially with Extremist, everyone was just like, "This is a really tedious fight." In general,
was a bit too much. They didn't need to do that. It was just kind of Extremist was just the lazy way of making him more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I feel actually, if they really wanted to do Extremist from the start, they should have made made more movesets for him that he would just not use until you get to Extremist or something.
Honestly, I mean, his pin was pretty hilarious though, but give or take on that, I just did not enjoy this fight. No matter how many chances I gave, it's not that I found myself carding, I just found myself literally putting the max amount of effort into any other hunt. And, I don't even put that much max amount of effort in speed running, especially when I'm starting over several times just to get the perfect run. With him, it's kind of it just doesn't feel like I'm playing the game at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it doesn't truly feel like Monster Hunter at that point. So, I mean, like I said, kudos for the concept design. Making him seem like he is a calamity that truly needs to be stopped. But the fight and fighting him is a completely different story. It wasn't exactly the most enjoyable experience. So,
and whether you love it or hate it, it did introduce a new feature into worlds that before Behemoth I don't think was actually being used at all,
Until
and it
Safi.
was oh yeah, until Safi, and it was just a
Yeah.
whole ecliptic meteor,
Yeah, the Eclipse.
gigantic
Yeah, the party wipe mechanic, where if you didn't
Yeah.
do, if you didn't hide, if you didn't have the rocks placed carefully and have them destroyed, and everyone hid behind them, during the ecliptic meteor, then the whole party would be wiped or whatever. So
Yeah.
anyone caught, not behind a rock would be instantly destroyed. And yeah, I totally feel you on that. He was definitely the first to introduce that sort of concept that made its way into the later game,
Yeah.
as far as like Master Rank and whatnot and Iceborne. It wasn't until the more powerful monsters. Only the most powerful really have one, but he did kind of introduce kind of like the ultimate move, like most monsters beyond that have like a truly super powerful move that they can use, and I think he was kind of like the beginning point of that.
Yeah.
So
I wish to be honest, the party wipe mechanic, I wish they made it more versatile or added more dynamics to it in the game.
So
I just don't feel I feel the party wipe mechanic was too linear to actually be fully enjoyed.
all right, so this seems to be a pretty good spot for him then. So let's talk about the next one, Black Diablos.
Let's go into Diablos.
You want to just skip Black, go straight to Diablos first before talking about
the discussion will lead into Black in a minute.
Yeah, I feel like that'd probably be the case as well. I'm pretty sure these are all in alphabetical order, actually. Now that I'm really looking at it.
Oh wow!
So
yeah, it is actually wow.
Devasho,
Wait,
Dodogama,
hold on.
Great Jagras, Gyrototis.
We don't have a monster that begins with C.
Cunt?
Oh my god!
Like we don't have a monster that begins with C in World. Oh wow!
Yeah, Kermit.
No, I don't think we do. Yeah, no monster here has.
I'm pretty sure I'm here.
C.
But no, Diablos, Herbivore, Charger, Ruler of your shit, and Ruler of every Barroth that dare laid their heads onto their horns.
Yeah, loves to dig. Honestly, is kind of the only monster in this game that digs besides Black Diablos. But so he has a very unique mechanic, and he is the.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say he is the apex predator of the Wildspire Wastes. So, in general, of his biome, he is considered the most powerful. So and when you Diablos? Fight him, so what I was saying is when you fight him, or rather when he is introduced, he's kind of introduced alongside a quest, or like a quest where you also need to fight Rathlos as well in order to progress the story. You need to fight the apexes of both the Wildspire Waste and the Forest in order to continue in the story. So getting to see, the King of the Skies, and then the King of the I'd say underground, but I mean I don't know how
King
to
of the Skies,
it.
he doesn't really fly as much, but he mainly does charge and charge and charge at you a lot. It's not implemented in World, but in previous gens, he had his time digging under the ground and popping up and then charging at the player a lot.
Yeah, I was just saying the duality between the two. But you were saying?
I feel for Diablos, he is almost perfect. The only thing is just he needs more of like everything. It's weird. Like he doesn't really have any avid weakness to his design. Like story wise, he's fine. Gameplay wise, he's fine. Everything, he's fine. He's the king of the Wildspire Waste. He actually generally is the king of that map. It's just there should be more of everything. Like for example, he can only like when you don't engage with him, when he's underground, there's only one place on that map where if you put screamer pods, that he will rise up, create a giant crater that you can fall in, that will actually disturb your hands and also disturb other monsters because other monsters fall down that hole and get injured and stuff. But it's just like it would be cool if that happened more places on the map.
To be fair, and this, I'm gonna have to counter the argument towards that. Is like his design was meant to be a desert only monster, really. In the case that, yeah, it would be that he seems to need much, but the thing is, he's a straight brute. His whole ecology is to be a straight brute. And like for an herbivore as well is like, he doesn't do much, but like if he sees anything that disturbs like his environment, he will charge at them. But he's not that he's more like a half aggressive monster where if he is very territorial. So to be fair, this is one of the most powerful brutesque monsters ever to exist in any desert lands that you don't want to encounter. If you see cacti or any type of vegetation, you do not want to be there because that's where he likes to be. He likes to eat that stuff and then move on with his life. If anybody tries to, poke at him, all he can do is charge at them, not always dig, but like just charge straight at them. It's not much to give or take, especially with his introduction. Aside from Monoblos, which a lot of you guys haven't seen as well, it's kind of like these monsters are rulers of the desert, not straight rulers, but they are like the soldiers of that stuff. So
Yeah.
Until his general weakness, which is straight ice, is to show that he despises the cold and big digs for like underground to sleep and stuff.
Yeah, that is true. And I mean, I'm not asking for him to like be able to pop out of everywhere, but like when I mean more like it would be cool if there was like 3 different places that he could pop out if you put screamer pods. Like, for example, that place that before you go to the desert region where you can climb under the opening inside the mountain and then go down. Like it would be really cool if it was like because he's not openly aggressive, right? He's more passive aggressive. If it was like the ability to that, it was RNG depending where he chose his territory to be. So it's possible that if you put screamer pods there, that his head will just pop out of the wall and change the fight up that you're having of it. It'd be funny and cool. Like his head's just popping there and then you just pulls it back. Kind of seeing who's disturbing my peace, that kind of thing. But it's like it's not guaranteed to happen all the time. That kind of thing. I feel that it would just supplant his dominance a bit more as well.
But in terms of monster design, and like combat design, I would put it in a pretty good category. Not only because of the simple fact that he's one of those monsters that will chase you to all ends if you try to run away, let alone via underground or upper or above. He also does seem to have like one of those 2 turf wars and a turf war with his like female self, his in heat self, where he loses that fight, give or take that one is a extremely pissed off, horny Diablos.
Yeah,
like he does seem to have a lot of funny turf wars that even Devil Joe rips his horn out. And when seeing 2 Diablos go at it also shows that there are some instances where Diablos do fight over territory and need to like make sure who has the bigger horns of the entire kid. It's kind of like they're just straight bulls at this point.
One of the things I like to point out is I think I personally like the design, the fact that he is one of the first truly large monsters that is actually an herbivore, and the reason for his aggression against you is that he's just very territorial. Like he's not like some of the other large monsters where they actually do feed on meat, like and they're carnivores and whatnot, but this one he solely eats like cactuses and whatnot, and he just he just really doesn't like anyone getting on his turfs, or so he'll actually just kind of come after you with these really big horns and I always thought, that was pretty interesting because I didn't know that at first for a little while, and especially and this same could be kind of said for his female in heat Black Diablo's counterpart, which is supposedly a more aggressive female version that is in heat, as I had mentioned before. And as far as like actual gameplay goes, the digging mechanic obviously is very unique to them specifically.
I just
And
like the
while
sound effect
it's
where they just pop out of the ground.
yeah,
Just
and so Diablos is definitely more predictable. Black Diablos is, with the nature of her aggressiveness, she digs more often, and she actually can kind of wait for a short bit, kind of timing her appearances before she attacks. And one of the things I also would like to kind of mention is the fact that there can be, or rather, they introduce the concept of the fact that some of their attacks can be used against them. Like, if a Diablos charges into a pillar of rock, like, they can get themselves stuck, and that leaves them open to attack. Something that I don't think a lot of people quite know of, or at least remember.
yeah, he does do that.
But he's one of the very first monsters that kind of, you can kind of bait them into making them vulnerable. I mean, whether through screamer pods,
Their
the
own
Noyos,
strength is literally their whole weakness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
they
that
they
is
do
very
have
unique
poor
about
eyesight,
them.
so they do rely on sound. So using streamer pods and whatnot to get them out of the ground while digging, you can actually make a lot of good opening for yourselves when fighting these monsters. And I feel like that's actually, in my opinion, a pretty cool design for both of them, honestly. So, if I were to personally place these guys like in a tier, it would definitely be in the pretty cool design. Probably, both in the same area.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put Black Diablos, higher or lower, just because it's mostly just, regular Diablos, but, this likes to dig a little bit more often.
Fight her temper variant and the guiding lance, people. You'll have a fun time.
Although she does have one new attack that's, very powerful, and that's her, the charge attack that she does after doing her roar. She does like a quick roar attack, and then she just charges really fast, and that's one of the few attacks that you get that you actually need the decoration guard up to actually block. And I think it's one of the few.
I feel like that's kind of like a
abilities
war
that you
cry,
have
and a hyper aggressive war cry scream into an attack.
Yeah, it's one of the few attacks where you can't actually block this attack without without using the guard up deco or using the lance's power guard to avoid it. So that's also another attack that was the first for that sort of attack, where if you tried to block it, you would still be hit with it. It was a very, very strong attack. So I can't quite remember if they changed that if they gave that to her in Iceborne, or if that was base world. I do thoroughly remember that that being the case, though. So I could be wrong as far as it being the first, though.
Or never understood why, but they had when Diablos were enraged, they had black smoke coming out of their mouths. I do not see that in World anymore, which kind of confuses me to question why they would remove that, because that was also a bidding point to tell that Diablos was pretty pissed off.
Mm-hmm.
So, given that they remove a specific concept from Diablos, or at least, for one of the variants, and his deviant, which is the Bloodbath variant, was one of the most funnest and hype. Like, you could see Black Diablos within this deviant, but even more so worse, because he had steam popping all over his body and the veins pouring down his horns.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so would everyone agree that they fit pretty well into the pretty cool design area for both of them in general? Any differences in opinion, Yif?
Not really. Naga? Oh,
Inaga?
back to life. Either he clocked out or
Or he might have muted himself. Oh well.
so. Devil
So
Joe.
let's leave him for now. Yeah. Devil Show, next up on the list. The World Eater. Honestly,
Roll
I think he's
credits.
actually he's pretty cool. Just saying it right now. Like when you're first kind of introduced to him, at least in World, I mean, the quest that you see him in, I don't think it quite gives him quite the grand introduction that he deserves. I think it could have been a little cooler, especially with the way that it involved the handler. And honestly, I'm not too fond of the handler to begin with. So, but his music, I especially loved his music. It truly kind of lets you know that he was in the area and he was there to take something down.
He was just hungry and angry, and he just knew what he wanted.
And now, most of these monsters have fantastic music, but I have to say Devil Joe's particularly stands out, especially because I kind of relate it almost to being similar in the same vein as like the music that comes up when Darth Vader in the Star Wars franchise kind of appears.
I do, because like he gives a really
as soon
Star
as you
Wars
hear that
vibe.
music, you realize shit's about to go down, and his music kind of gives that same kind of energy. He's that super unstable kind of but super powerful kind of threat in this new world, and he will chase you down to the ends of the earth to hunt you, to eat you. And he was one of the most persistent monsters to have ever come up, besides Basil Geese, in that he's another invader type monster. So
yeah, Devil Joe has been pretty much around for a good number to be the type to ruin your day in each quest, let alone eat your earnings and such. So for a monster that is born to just wreak havoc and eat everything, and then die doing so because he can't quench his hunger, even eating his own kid, if that's the case, because that's I don't know how they survive. It just stems from like this monster is just aggression with hunger incarnate, gluttony at rage. So you can't get any more better than just a heavily enraged dinosaur with a Star Wars theme, who has a feast for battle every time he sees somebody or anything in the sort. He consumes, demolishes, and eats everything. Let alone for like one of the fang type wyverns, the smaller ones, that how he just uses them. Or just the bird wyverns just uses them as weapons and just has a toe-to-toe with the elders. This shows that this monster just generally doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah, he's also, I think he is the only monster to actually use another monster, like generally, smaller fang type monster, as a weapon against the hunter to take them down. Like, especially if that's the monster you're hunting. Like, you might be fighting a monster, then he comes through and it's just like, oh no, a Devil Joe's here, and then he comes in and he picks up your monster and starts beating you to death with it. You're just like, no, that's my monster. To death. Yeah, it's like he is so intrusive, but in such a cool way, and I love it. And I love the lore behind him, how supposedly he's kind of like this freak of nature, where nature kind of went overboard with the whole apex kind of, well, I guess you could say kind of apex predator, where his body is basically just like one huge muscle that constantly needs energy to just sustain itself, and he constantly needs to eat in order to sustain that energy, and because of that, he's just always so hungry all the time, and he'll just eat everything to sate that everlasting hunger that he needs to satiate that the needs that he needs for such a large, muscular, powerful body. And he's one of the few monsters that I personally came to actually fear, because whenever he attacked, he put his whole body into every attack he did. He was trying with every fiber of his being to take you down, and you could really feel that. He was like, this guy wants me dead. Oh my god.
No matter where you are, he's chasing you to the just chasing you to the ends of earth. He wants you.
He will chase you down no matter where you go. Like, unless you flash him or dunk pod him or not, he will find you. He will sniff you out, and he will just he does not care what it takes. He will find you and he will eat you. And that terrified me, but it also was so cool at the same time. And honestly, I do think personally that I put him in the kind of amazing design, kind of with Betelgeuse. They do kind of fit together with, like I mentioned, with the whole ecology standpoint. How Deviljho was kind of like Mother Nature kind of overcompensating, for a kind of predator, a very powerful kind of predator that in a sort of, desperate balance needed to create another very powerful predator to deal with him, because he could basically eat ecosystems completely out. He'd wipe out ecosystems, and that's why he's got the title of World Eater. I always thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
So I think even his fight, like he was definitely a threat. He had, when you first fight him in the base world, he has I think he has a very high health, and he has a pretty tough skin, and he used the dragon element, like, specifically. He actually, like, besides his physical attacks, he actually weaponized the dragon element fairly effectively. I think, unlike some of the other monsters, I don't remember there being a monster that actually used pure dragon element quite in the same way that Deviljho did, especially when he was enraged with his dragon breath and whatnot. Because I do believe that was also, from what I remember about the ecology video about him, I think that was part of what made him so angry and so powerful at the same time. So yeah, I do think that this guy, he does belong kind of in the amazing side. Maybe not quite perfect, probably like just a step under it, though.
Well, you do realize that we have to go for his super hangry variant then.
Yeah, that is true. There is that as well. Did we ever? Let's see. Did we ever?
He's right there. So for what I have for savages, oh boy. And if I told you how a step further his ecology goes when he's in this state, is just the brink of death. This is him far past the hunger that he cannot sustain and the rage given. And it's kind of like, at this point, you can see it within his body, his veins, his body's just pouring out with so much dragon that he is down. He is literally endangering itself because it just can't get a good satisfactory towards his hunger.
Mm-hmm.
And the way he just expels that against Elder Dragons too. Beam struggling against Elder Dragons and raging of sorts is kind of like, this monster is just blind. Is just filled with so much blind rage and hunger that even his whole moveset is different from his original. It is just too much to the point where he actually deals full-on damage to the monster that you're fighting without having to grip them. And it's just like, he's literally just born to be angry, eat ecosystems, or die of it.
Mhm.
And when
I
he does, if realistically, if World wanted to show his death, a good top of his half would have exploded.
Yeah, honestly, I forgot exactly what caused him to transform from his normal to savage state, and I think there was like two
He
schools of thought on that.
he
In
just
which
could not
first was
sustain. He could not sustain his hunger, and he was getting
yeah,
angrier and hungrier. So his
yeah,
dragon grew stronger
that's
within his range.
yeah. I think that was one school of thought where he couldn't he can't consume enough to truly satiate that hunger. He just got so hungry where he's basically killing himself with all that with the and he's using he's going all in trying to in that last desperate bit to get something to satiate that insatiable hunger that he constantly has, that's now probably exponentially increased because he is now like on the point of actual starvation. And for a creature that is already starving nearly all the time, like the amount of desperation that you would probably be in, I could see that sort of thing transforming him from his usual self to something that's even more fearsome. And I think the other school of thought was that in a similar vein, in that they were so hungry. I think there was like it was what happened if a Deviljho found another Deviljho and they consumed him, and I think the excess dragon energy that they possess within themselves caused it to transform into this crazy powerful hungry creature. Because I mean, from the way we've seen dragon element interact with some of the other monsters, and I'd like to point out, like, specifically Ebony Odo, it does seem to have an effect on a significant effect on their mentality. They literally become insane with their hunger and whatnot. And so
I would just put Savage Deviljho. The only reason I would put him in perfectly designed is because his core moveset and his core difficulty is just way too much for a regular hunter. Like, aside from for a high rank version of Deviljho, which is kind of like he puts fear into new coming hunters. No, that fear stays n times 10 with it because of the amount of dragon he just expels all over the place. That it's just so relentless that you really can't escape from this guy. He is chasing you to 3 areas tops after he decides to move on to the next area. That, or just even less if you go to an area he has no access to.
Yeah, he is absolutely relentless. Like, even more so than his more relatively more sane species, regular species here. Honestly, I don't think I would not mind placing him in the perfectly designed. I think that he this transformation is kind of a good way of kind of showing how to kind of properly implement that sort of different reasons for the transformation and how it affects them. It is kind of sad how he is one of the very few monsters that is truly weak to dragon, besides like the Wrath family and whatnot. Because beyond them, there aren't a whole lot of other monsters that are on this list that are actually specifically weak to dragon.
Aside from just other dragons in general.
Yeah, and even then, like, most of them aren't necessarily weak, but they're just kind of they're affected by the Elder Seal properties for sure. Versus this guy who is actually fairly weak to it, besides his cousin. I think a regular Deviljho is actually weaker to thunder versus dragon, but the Savage Deviljho species is particularly weak to dragon. So I guess that kind of goes to show that the excess dragon is despite being so much more power, giving him the power boost that he is, it still does hurt him, especially because with the way his muscles just ripple and tear his skin open, and it glows. It looks so angry, and it looks like it hurts so much. and there's just so much involved with him. He's just like in
It's
this
literally
perpetual
what would
state of.
happen if Hulk just turned straight up, like Hulk was mixed with Dragon.
He's like he's so hungry, but it hurts so much. But he's so hungry, but it hurts so much. But he's so hungry. He's just constantly just driven absolutely insane, and I love that. So yeah, I have no qualms with putting him in this category. I do think that he is honestly very well designed for this monster, even compared to his the usual subspecies, or not the regular species. So yeah, enough gushing about this guy. He's pretty cool, but we should get to the other guys. So next on the list, Dodogama.
He automatically
The monster
just
that
gets a
most people
perfect
argue
design.
would be the bestest of boys. And I'm in that school of thought. He is the best boy. He belongs in the perfectly. Well, maybe not really. Not exactly. He is, at least as far as like his, from an ecology standpoint, it's kind of weird how they place him in the Elder's Recess when, in actual, he's not a particularly aggressive monster. He's actually very chill.
He's one of the most passive monsters that the guild has. Guild or hunters alike just don't bother hunting him. There's nothing wrong with what he does.
Yeah, he just eats rocks and sleeps.
That's
and obviously, he's. And I think even in game they mentioned that a lot of people think that he is actually adorable, and there was a quest where it's just like people don't want to hurt this guy.
Can't break it. You can't break to it or something like that.
Yeah, that's the quest. People, in general, people just can't bring themselves to hurt him. And even now, like I personally do not want to slay a Dodogama. I try my best not to, but. However, I have seen a few other people who think otherwise, and I can kind of understand because Dodogama can intervene in fights, and sometimes he can actually help you, but there's a few times where he actually aims for you, and that can be annoying. I have seen that happen, and have it happen to me a few times
He's
before.
actually one of the tier 1 blast monsters, actually.
Yeah, he is definitely one of the few monsters out there that does utilize like the blast element specifically. And I think when his mouth glows, like after he eats rocks, it's actually the highest hit zone value in the game of straight 1 versus versus other hit zone values where most of the time, like the highest raw value is generally like 0.8 or 0.9, but no, he actually has the weakest weak spot ever. So if you ever like to actually, and I think that was actually tested from Team Darkside when it came to what's the highest possible number that you can reach, like with a great sword. And they generally use the Dodogama because he has because his glowing mouth is the weakest of any sort of weak point, in the entire game. It makes me sad that that he has to be the one. He's the bestest boy, but he's also the bestest boy for testing max damage.
I don't know if anybody even notices that he does dig underground to sleep, and you can hardly see him.
Yeah, it's generally you usually see him when his the little sleep bubbles kind of pop up, and that's where you see. Oh yeah, there's a Dodogama sleeping here. He's usually pretty well hidden.
Yeah, so it's kind of like he's one of the tamed out of all the other fanged wyverns, with a whale noise at that.
I mean, as far as despite how much I dislike fighting him, I mean, I guess we should, probably mention that he is not particularly hard to fight. He is actually a very easy fight, especially for something that's in the Elder's Recess, which is a place where most very powerful monsters are known to congregate. So seeing a Dodogama there of all places, and him being such a particularly easy fight is kind of, I don't know, it's different. It's a nice change of pace that you see something so, cute and generally easygoing just kind of lives there, but Like his fight is just kind of lame. Yeah, honestly, anyone, if you can take on like a great Jagras, he has a very similar moveset to him. Besides, spitting lava rocks at you and digging at you, but beyond that, there's not really much to his fight. So, as far as like from an entire overall design and lore standpoint, despite him being the best boy and being so chill of a monster, like his design overall, besides that, he's not really that special in my opinion. He's decent. I wouldn't say he's pretty cool, because honestly, we don't really even, there's not really much to say about his moves other than the fact that he eats rocks and he spits them out and he rolls over you, much like Great Jackers does. So I'd put him in the decent design with Anjanath and Barath, in that he is probably the easiest monster in the entirety of the biome of the Elder's Recess. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would put a decent design.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, similar thoughts. I take it.
Yeah.
Because he really isn't all that special. Besides, the whole digging, blast blight, and shooting flaming rocks, which isn't particularly, unique in and of itself. So, anyways, next Fang Wyvern, Great Gyros, the monster that you hardly ever fight, kind of like Dodogama, but there's no real reason to fight him either. I mean,
if anything, they're more of an alibi asset than like a common monster to hunt.
I'm trying to help you.
Honestly, I don't
know your things to fall down.
It's hard to really think of any reason why you would even want to go back to fight him, besides maybe for the fashion, because he does have a pretty cool armor set, like a cool looking armor set. It's pretty interesting, but other than that, I don't really hunt this guy very often. I mean, I might see him if I'm strolling around in the Vale and he happens to be there, but
if anything, the benefits that you would get from this boy is his kid does paralyze the monster. They don't really focus on you all that much. They'll only focus on the monster you're hunting really.
I mean, plus he also has his little cronies, his little Gyros family backing him up whenever he does get into a fight.
Yeah.
And in general, he is kind of a pushover, kind of like Dodogama. These guys are pretty similar when it comes to how the difficulty of the fight. It's pretty simple, and obviously the paralyzing agent, I'm pretty sure, is to protect themselves against their apex predator, which happens to be Odogaron for the Rotten Vale. So in general, they do fit into the scene kind of, as scavengers and whatnot. Just they're not particularly outstanding, and so I do kind of think that along with Dodogama, he probably does fit into the decent design. I mean, he is the whole Gila monster-esque kind of look, like a hooded Gila monster-esque kind of look, is pretty dope. He's not gonna lie, it's pretty awesome looking. But beyond that, it's not like there's anything particularly special besides his paralyzing fangs.
Yeah,
he's a very easy monster, like kind of pretty much a pushover. So I'd say he probably belongs in decent design. Not much to really say else about him. So I guess that we should move on then.
Yeah.
So Great Jagras, the very first like actual monster that you meet, like an actual large monster that's not like one of the smaller jaggy, or the smaller monsters. So he is the first, I guess, major threat as a large monster. Well, not a major threat, but the first actual large monster where I am messing this up pretty bad on this description. He is the first large monster you meet. Let's just put it like that. So I mean, and he's made to be beginner monster for for tutorial purposes as far as how large monsters would work. So he is a very easy fight. He is meant to be an easy fight. He's kind of a pushover for everything. Like even Anjanath, when he an Anjanath will come over and kind of thrash this dude around because he is such easy pickings. So, I mean, the fact that he can just go up and just eat an Aptonaut whole is kind of interesting. I mean, he kind of gives that.
There's not much to his kit but the disgust, like, gurgitation that he just throws out. So
Yeah,
it's kind of like even his kid don't do much. They do sometimes provide help, but they don't do that in a unique way that Gyros does. This monster just I don't know, man. It's like
I mean,
he's a beginner sandbag, but then you could just say the same for Gyros and Dodo
in
Gama.
the other, so yeah, for what he was designed for, he definitely kind of fits the bill. But I mean, he is basically a punching bag, and as soon as you finish fighting him, you kind of don't really need to focus on him like for any other reason. Like he kind of becomes left in the dust, much like Great Gyros. I mean, he has his he has the Jagras pack that he is usually swarmed with that generally helps him in fights, much like Gyros. But I mean, unlike Gyros, who has like the paralyzing fangs and whatnot, he doesn't really have anything particularly special besides the regurgitating whatever he's eaten.
Yeah,
And his big belly kind of leaves him open because that big belly is also kind of a weak spot as well. So,
yeah.
So I would say poor. I don't know if I'd put poorly designed, but
I would put poorly designed because it's kind of like it for a beginner. At least have some type of unique mechanic with your.
Yeah, he's basically just a giant pushover. He is nothing truly special. I mean, he is your first big monster fight, but it's nothing to really write home about. Like honestly, the first time I honestly see a monster and think, oh wow, that's pretty interesting. It's pretty cool. Was when I first fight Anjanath, and I think that's the monster you fight. Shortly after this, I believe after him, it's Pookie and then Anjanath. And so, after you see these monsters, then you see this guy come out. It's just like, oh wow, he's pretty cool, right? So, in general, when you fight this guy, he's just kind of meh,
Yeah.
So I guess poorly designed would probably fit him fairly well. Giratodus, the other low-level monster next to Barath, that lives in the wastelands. Honestly, I would probably also put him into the poorly designed area.
He was supposed to be a Plesioth replacement.
Yeah.
But that's like how I would assume. But it's kind of like there was no other way.
I think it was all supposed to be kind of like, because Leviathans couldn't be in the game, they wanted to still have some Piscine type of wyverns in the game, and so they chose this of all things, a mudfish. Which was
never
really
seen. This actually is a world original monster as well.
Mm-hmm. That is true. I do believe he is a variant of the Vasyoth, which is actually came in from previous games. So I don't know. He also doesn't kind of stand out. He kind of is like the.
He stands in the environment. He does body Barath in like some sorts. He does stick it to the mud a lot more better than Barath would ever do. It's kind of like Barath would just have like one resting place to sleep, but he does like for a beginner Piscine wyvern, he does like put some type of fight for beginners actually, with his whole dive in and go out shoot mud mechanic and just water blight you and shit. But it's
he does use the mud more effectively. I could definitely say that.
So I would just put him as a decent design than a poorly designed, only because of the simple fact that he may have not have much going for him, but he's also not as bad as people would sought out to put him. It's just he's kind of like he's kind of like the monster nobody ever asked for, but he's just there to fit a role that is missing.
Yeah, and honestly, of the entire cast, I would not be opposed to saying that he is probably the ugliest of the whole lot. Even though he is very unique in his design, besides being a Lavasioth subspecies, like he is still very ugly. He is not very pleasing to look at.
Yeah.
So, I mean, design wise, he's different. He uses mud, kind of like Baroth does, a little bit more effectively, probably. And I don't know. He doesn't really leave like his specific locale very often. The little area that he usually likes to sit in. So it's I guess it would be okay to put him in a decent design, just because he does come from World. He was first introduced into World, even if he was a little underwhelming. But if there is any sort of poor design or even terrible, I would probably talk about Lavasioth. Would you like to talk about him, or would you want to move on?
I would like to put him in the very terrible design, because
I would also terrible, absolutely
I don't
terrible.
know what Capcom was thinking with this monster. Back then in Generation, in like old gens, he was like a tier of Plesioth and all that, and he was like fairly decent with his lava. He was really unique with all the sorts of ways he would utilize his lava to, he just hides a lot. He hit a lot and uses hitboxes effectively just to like throw a bunch of hunters off and scatter them around. So it's like you could really just focus on him. You also have to think about where he's just gonna appear, how reckless he's gonna be. In this game, it's that, but dialed down with also a mechanic that really, really could do much for beginners at least. Where you need a fire weapon to harden him and a water weapon to damage him greatly. That made absolutely no sense.
There was also the torch pods that you'd use when you find on the ground, and I think that's what a lot of people would try to use. But in general, I feel like his kit was, oh gosh, where do I even start with this guy? Like, if I were to rank like terribly designed monsters, like he would be down there, like in general with the likes of Kushala Daora as far as like design, just because, I mean, for one, like you mentioned, he is weak to water, but all that does is make his skin harden quicker so that you start bouncing more often. And this is even with purple sharpness, you will still bounce off of his shell, which is really, really annoying, because you'd figure that having the best sharpness would make it so that you could cut through just basically anything, but you can't with this guy. And there's the fact that he either needs to swim in the lava, or you need torch pods, or use a fire weapon, which he is immune to, by the way. He is completely immune to fire, in order to soften his shell. So there's this thing going on with his weaknesses, where his weakness is actually can be used as a strength, and his strength is actually part of what could be used to defeat him, and that sort of thing is, in my opinion, a pretty crappy design. Like, if he's weak to something, obviously he will take more damage, but if he only takes that damage for a very specific amount of time, and it causes bad stuff to happen, then what would you truly even consider that a weakness?
I really just wouldn't even know what to do at that point, because it's kind of like the fight is now just going everywhere.
Yeah, then there's also the fact that he goes out of bounds a lot, and I'm not just talking like he'll dig to swim into the lava and jump up and hit you with some lavas. Like, he will actually like physically go out of bounds. Like, there's a certain area in the Elder's Recess where there's this little kind of volcano-ish kind of area that can erupt, and he can actually swim outside the boundaries that a player can reach and just attack you. And so unless you're using a ranged weapon, there is actually no way you can actually attack him back. And I think that is actually terrible design. Why should a monster be able to hurt you and you be able to do literally nothing against it besides, using a ranged type of weapon? That's and I mean, this is coming from the point of view from a person who uses melee a lot. Like I do use ranged with him a lot, and even then I'm still frustrated because you can still have your ammo bounce off of him unless you're using specific types of ammo, and so it really is truly annoying. And then the coup de grace on top of it all, when you finally break his shell, like it's actually broken, his hit zone, like that weak spot hit zone, becomes a permanent bad hit zone. Like you're doing less damage to that part than you did the entire fight up to that point. And so is any weak spot that you hit truly a weak spot at that point? Because if you break that, if you do so much damage that you break it, you would assume that, oh, it's broken. His shell is broken. I mean, you don't bounce anymore on that part, which is nice, but you just do less damage overall. And it's just like, why don't I just do more damage instead? His armor's broken. He should be more vulnerable. But no, it's actually the opposite. He takes less damage in general, even if you don't bounce. So overall, this entire fight is his entire design. I mean, as a firefish, he's more original than the Gyarados, as in he is the fish that came first, the original Piscine Wyvern. So, I mean, that's the only thing that really goes for him, but that's nowhere near enough to make up for the really cruddy, fight mechanics that, that make up the hunt versus him. And so I honestly cannot justify placing him any higher than terribly designed. I'm not sure what the devs were thinking when they made this guy, but this is a good example of a truly bad way to implement mechanics, whether it be weaknesses that are opposite depending on his state of being, or the way hit zones value work when it comes to breaking parts, or even just going out of bounds and not being able to attack him in any way, shape, or form, and not being able to follow him. It's truly terrible, and I dislike that fight with every fiber of my being.
Yeah.
And to top it all off, he doesn't even have good gear. There's no reason to get his gear. The only reason why anyone would fight him would be for the Deco Farm, and that's only because he was the least fought monster for a very good reason. In fact, I recently had a player that I was helping with through the game. He basically kind of just encountered Lavasioth, and he took 40 minutes with that hunt, and he was so angry that he basically just rage quit on the spot, because he was like, what kind of fight is this? Why am I doing so badly against this particular monster? And I told him listed the same reasons why, and I told him that this is honestly one of the worst fights you will have in this game, besides the likes of Kushala Deoris. So, and he did come back eventually to give it another try, but this monster specifically made him rage quit with how frustrating it was to fight him. So, and I do not blame him in the least. If people rage quit because of this fish, like I would totally, absolutely understand. He is one of the epitomes of terrible monster design, and I think like the devs should really take another look at this monster and kind of try to figure out why this sort of thing didn't work, so that they can do better than before, because there's no reason why a monster fight like this should exist. This is just absolutely terrible. I cannot stress enough how bad of a fight this is. So, I guess enough of me ranting on how bad he is. Pretty unanimous, I guess, that he is very terribly designed.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on to Kirin, one of the one of the more frustrating of the Elder Dragons that you meet, and also the second Elder Dragon that you. The first one technically being Zord and Magdaros, but this is the first one you actually have a more, I don't know.
One of the chillest Elder Dragons I've ever seen in my entire life, actually.
He's pretty chill. Yeah, not gonna lie, he is definitely pretty chill. But like the fight against him, they do alter his fight like as you go up in the ranks, because I do believe he is the only Elder that you can fight in low rank besides Zor Magdaros. Like when they first try to stop him. So in general, this guy, I don't know. He is literally based off of the I believe the Japanese Kirin, like the actual Kirin of Japanese lore. And so he does, as from the actual depictions of what Kirins look like, I think he does kind of fit the bill fairly well, and his abilities are pretty awesome. He controls lightning, especially using the horn on his head. I mean, he's a lightning unicorn practically. And he definitely is tough, especially when you fight him. Getting hit by those lightning and being paralyzed sometimes. It can be really a bit of a jarring experience. And honestly, in the later stages of the game, he definitely becomes a truly annoying kind of monster to fight, especially with the way his body is generally very hard, and so he is also one of the smallest monsters that you fight. That is actually, I do believe he is actually the smallest Elder Dragon, but as a monster as a whole, he is the smallest large dragon, if that makes sense, or largest wyvern, should I say? Besides maybe Kuluyaku, or Seitsuyaku, he's generally considered one of the smallest out there, and so trying to attack him as a group in a multiplayer setting can be difficult at times, especially if other people are not wearing the flinch free deco, and you might accidentally try to hit each other, and his head is the only weak point. So everyone trying to pile up on the head can be a real mess. So
honestly, for design and combat wise, I do like that Kirin does tend to be very formidable, especially with his whole lightning gimmick. It starts to become a pattern later on as well, in terms of mastering as well. He does like to play tic-tac-toe a lot with you in terms of the lightning strikes and all. I like the fact that in one of these special quests, when you're about to fight a Raja, you have a fully enraged Kirin that cannot be walled. And that being dealt, a lot of people deliberately struggled with that type of Kirin, actually. They really... It's one of those Kirins that it was a very pissed off Kirin that just was fucked with and does not want to even remotely see people at the moment, because it just can't control its lightning, it's lost its horn, it's aggravated, it's really just pissed. It's the epitome of a really chill Elder Dragon just lost something, and that something was very important, and it's just pissed for a whole day. It just doesn't want to talk to anybody. It lost a year's worth of rent. That's how pissed this Kirin is.
Interesting way of putting it.
So it's kind of like you really gotta you can't give, in terms of design, this monster is heavily unique, and especially in most of all the other games. Though I do hate that when it's in its aura mode, it does harden its body and only its head is present. But it did not stop me from wanting to mount it 90% of the time to make sure that it stayed down and I can knock it off with ease. But this monster has a lot of smart gimmicks, and its AI is pretty clever too when it comes to the paralysis part, where it will unleash that, that lightning strike. Just be gone with the thunderclap.
Yeah. He does move very fast, for a monster when he does move around.
So I were to put it in this category, I would just go for a pretty cool design for a Elder Dragon. It's docile. You can literally walk with it, and then if you have a fight with it, it'll tussle you down to the end. It's
Honestly,
really
I don't
cool.
think I would disagree. He is, a pretty, very interesting type of fight. Especially, he has a, he kind of, despite his size, he is still very powerful elementally. So, obviously, it can be a little bit of a challenge trying to, find because he is so small. But I mean, other than that, which is pretty obvious, I do think that he is a fairly solid fight overall.
Yeah.
Using his elemental attacks, being very creative with them. So, yeah, I also think he belongs pretty cool design. All right, next one, Kuluyaku, the second monster we find that's considered a large wyvern. He's an interesting little little bird guy. I don't know.
Thieving bird.
He's not old. Yeah.
He's literally a thief.
He's a chicken. He's a walking. Well, not talking, but he's a very large, featherless type of chicken. Like this is what a chicken would probably look like if they didn't have feathers and instead had scaly skin, and were very large in general. So, I don't know. This is one of the few monsters that seem to kind of have a personality to them. That seems, he's very mischievous in general. He's very sneaky. When he tries to get food or whatnot, he even uses, digs up and picks up rocks to defend himself and uses as a tool, to defend himself. So, he is fairly smart, and that's what he definitely uses to survive in the locales that he comes up in. He's not terribly creative, in my opinion. After all, like I said, he's essentially just a giant featherless chicken with scales. With the head resembling a dodo bird. So
he's literally the depiction of a dodo bird.
Yeah, I mean, he's fairly agile. He likes to jump around quite often. When you fight him, he's rather small. He doesn't have he doesn't have much going for him in this fight besides that he'll jump at you. With his claws, he'll try to peck at you with his beaks. Just acts like a typical bird.
He'll literally just throw materials at you. He's just a generalization of a bird brain.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty good way of putting it. So, honestly, I'd probably put him somewhere like in the decent or poorly designed area.
I would put him in
poorly designed just because, I'd only put him in poorly designed because there really isn't much going for him besides, the fact that he's, he seems like a very mischievous, clever bird that uses tools to his advantage. If in a very rudimentary way. Not quite sure about decent design. Is there any other points that you could add in particular that might lend to him being a more decently designed monster?
Well, he is an admirable ally to Devil Joe when he's thrown at you.
Yeah. Yeah,
I still have that gif where Kuluyaku is being thrown at a hunter. That hunter immediately carts with max health.
Yeah. Jeez. Honestly, he definitely is, kind of he's very, very easy to take care of. After all, he is the second monster after the Great Jaggers that you meet, I believe. And so he is, kind of towards the beginner end, and while he's his looks aren't quite all that great,
I literally wonder how they're gonna fit him into Rise.
Yeah, the fact that he's coming back in Rise, I'm not actually sure how how he would fit with some of these crazy monsters that they've got coming around. I mean, like I said, he's obviously got some, smarts going for him. He's pretty crafty, so he'd probably, use his smarts in some way or super form to try to survive out there. But yeah, bird brain is definitely a good way of putting this guy. I don't think I would have too many qualms with putting him in indecently designed. I still think he'd probably better to fit in the poorly designed because, besides, why I mentioned his cleverness and, using tools and just jumping at you, he really isn't all that much. So, I mean, he is pretty cute, honestly, sometimes. I do feel sorry sometimes when I do have to bang on him. Kind of like when I fight Tsuyaku. I do feel sad beating up on them because they do seem very... I mean... They don't really like to bother you all that much. They generally keep themselves much, for the most part. So... anyways, Kulve Taroth.
Golden gal.
The mommy Jackrace. As a lot of people would probably call her.
So, in canon, we don't really slay her.
Mm-hmm. At least at first. Like, in the siege, like, you're just chipping the gold off of her, and eventually, you get her horns, and then she just leaves, and she's just done. It isn't until, like, mastering that she makes a comeback, and that you actually get a chance to actually slay her.
Yeah.
But
she has
like,
a lot
if we
going
go...
for her, though.
She
has a lot going for her. She has her own map. She had literally one of the best endgame weapons for base world.
Yeah, and as she actually has some of the best elemental weapons for endgame in Iceborne as well. So she's... I mean, if you want the best of the best as far as element, for master rank, you definitely want some of her stuff. So, I mean, it just means that most people would likely be farming her, but at the same time, I mean, despite the fact that she's got her own unique locale, it's completely different in that, and you get to explore a different place. It's the siege itself, like the siege fight in particular, is kind of boring because for the first part you're just trying to chase her down and just knock some pieces off of her while she's trying to run and whatnot, and it's all kind of leading up to how quickly you can damage her horns so that she can leave and end the siege fight. So I don't know, the siege itself is kind of lame-ish in my opinion. I mean, she has a interesting moveset. It's kind of reminiscent of the great Jagras, obviously. That's why we call her Mommy Jagras, because she's got the Jagras skeleton.
She's also a docile Elder Dragon as well. Really. She doesn't really... And how reports are, she's not really one of the most hostile Elder Dragons. She just has her own place. She just roams, and the only reason we're even hunting her ever so is for her gold.
Yes. Yeah, she doesn't really present, I don't think, that much as far as a threat to the guild. I mean, it's just she's kind of like your typical gold hoarding dragon type thing, but she likes to wear the gold instead of just hoarding it. She has like her own keep where she just stores everything. So
yep. So I would just put her in I would just put her in poorly designed only because her siege was just... It worked, but then it's just... Even her master rank fight, it being a DPS check was just... It was a no.
Yeah, it was... The fact that they turned the fight to a DPS check in the last one was pretty terrible.
So there was no reason to leave it. There was no reason to leave it at 15 minutes then. If in that span of time she was going to leave, so...
Yeah, so I mean, another thing I'd like to point out is her moveset. The fact that because she's so large and she uses the Jackrace moveset, whenever she does an attack like she charges at you and she rolls over, or she does a big fire flame pool attacks, they're so large that it basically makes it, that you're unable to actually DPS her without using a ranged weapon of some sort effectively. And even then, sometimes ranged have such a hard time because she moves so far whenever she like rolls over or whatnot. And so it's honestly, it can be difficult just getting good DPS on her. And I remember that specifically, when she'd be, rolling all over the place, and all I'd be doing was just chasing her down because that's all she did. And then she'd do a fire pull. I'm like, oh well, okay, I guess I can't attack her here anymore.
Honestly, if
Like,
she literally were to have all these mechanics that she has, AOE wise, would never be a massive issue if she was in a different game with that
Mhm.
compensate for that. I felt that at the end of her phase, it was all right, but the fact that there was a lot of thinking and coordination that you had to do, that you couldn't even be bothered to use the weapon you wanted without your teammates, and let alone when I say teammates doing it. And when I soloed this, I had to solo her with the charge blade, and I tried to do it so well to the point where I had to make sure that I was hitting her the right way, because her DPS check was just way too high for any other weapon out of the 14 to even. They could do it. You can't do it.
Yeah, even as a dual blade main, I definitely struggled trying to keep up with her, with her moving all over the place. I'm just constantly just dashing at her, trying to say, I was like, just stay still for a few seconds so I can, fight you and whatnot. And honestly, it was such a pain. It truly was a pain trying to fight her and just beat that DPS check. It's if she moves around too much, or if she just uses a fire pool and denies you access to her good weak spots altogether. It's just really annoying.
Yeah.
And the fact that the weapons that you get from her are completely RNG at the end of it all, like the
risk and reward is just not worth it.
Yeah, the risk versus reward is definitely not worth. You only have a chance of getting the Kiar weapons. There's only a few Teroth weapons worth note, and in the high rank version, there's other weapons that are even worse than that are in the pool that you could be able to get, and it's just like, we don't need these. No one ever really cares about these. They're not even worth trying to get. Everything else is just so much better. So why even bother? And so, in general, her as a whole, like considering everything, she is unique with her look. She's definitely one of the prettiest to look at with all the gold, for sure.
She has
She's
a
very
beautiful armor
luminous.
set too. But just in terms of her fight and all, it was just I just didn't enjoy it at all.
Even now, most people still, trying to grind for the Kiar weapons and whatnot. I still remember how long it took me weeks to get all of the Kiar dual blades I wanted, and that was just the dual blades. I still had all of the other weapons, elemental weapons that I wanted for some of the other weapons, like the bow, charge blade, switch axe. The more, weapons that could also do good with element. And I was just like, I'm not sure how much more I could put into this, just fighting her over and over again, trying to get, and it was such an annoying fight in general. It really just, as far as monsters to farm, she's one of the worst.
Yeah.
Despite her weapons being the best, it doesn't feel like it's even really worth it sometimes. So, yeah, poorly designed. And speaking of poorly designed monsters,
Now, before we continue, I would like to save this for a pause real quick.